Parliamentary reporters dictation number 39 at the speed of 160 words per minute from Kailash Chandra shortened transcription number 89 and 90. Last 5 seconds. Ready? Start. The honorable members who have spoken before said that the small growers get the correct price from the board. This is not so. The entire bulk of the profits they make in the home market and in the foreign market is kept by the bigger growers who dominate this coffee board. The price they get is more than what they pay to the small growers. That is the complaint of the small growers, so it is not correct to say that the profits this board makes are equally distributed to the small growers. Hence, the conflict between the big growers and the small growers is increasing. Therefore, it is necessary on the part of the government to do justice to the small growers. The government thinks that by taking powers for nominating the president of the board, it is able to do justice to the small growers. The number of the small growers is 34,000 while the number of the big growers is 590. Most of the seats reserved for the growers in the last board were monopolized by the big growers. The majority of the seats were held by the big growers and the number of seats the small growers got was very meager. It was not more than 4 if my recollection is correct. What the government should have done was to give equal representation to the small growers. They should have asked the growers to return their representatives or to give a panel of names from which government could have chosen some. The choice of the representatives should have been left to the respective organizations. If there was no organization for the small growers, government should have asked them to organize one separately and then send in their representatives. Our friend said that the representatives of the small growers were there on the existing board. It is true, but I know the practice of these big growers or big industries. Having given membership to the smaller fry on their organizations, they do not allow them to express themselves. The chairman or the man who holds sway of the board sees to it that all the members agree to what he dictates. That is the practice in these associations. We know that, so it is better to have a separate organization for the small growers and ask them to submit their panel of names to represent them on the board. Representation on the board should not be governed by the number of acres owned and the amount of capital invested, but by the number of growers. If this principle is adopted, the bigger growers will not be able to run away with what they want. In this connection, I would also say that instead of nominating the president, the government should do this. The government should ask the respective organizations of the big growers, the small growers, labor and the consumers to send in the names of their representatives and then include members of parliament. Then the board constituted in this way should be asked to elect its chairman. If this procedure is adopted, then the government can see that no big grower is elected to the chairmanship. In that case, only a man who can command a majority in the board will be elected, and that man will see to it that justice is done to all the interests concerned. But here the government, in the name of taking over control of the industry, wants to bureaucratize the whole industry. I don't think that by bureaucratizing the board of the government will be able in any way to help the industry to develop or to bring about better working conditions for the labor. One member in the select committee said that no representation should be given to labor. That is the attitude of the growers. That is the attitude generally of all employers in this country. But is it just on their part to deny representation to labor as well as to the consumers? Certainly the rights of these people should be reorganized, but personally I don't think that by merely giving representation to labor on the board, the government can do justice to labor. It is true that the minister in the select committee as well as in his reply to the debate in the other house said that the working conditions of labor were very pitiable and deplorable and should be improved. Sir, there was also a petition sent to the Lok Sabha by the employees of the coffee house recommending to the house that their petition should be considered. The employers deny the rights of the workers and they say that they have made all efforts to develop the industry in all these 13 years at whose cost? it is at the cost of the workers by paying them low wages. They have made a huge profit, which is expressed in the reply of Mr. Radcliffe to a question of the Honorable Minister for Commerce and Industry that he had been distributing a dividend of 13.5% in 1 year. In 1 year, he had given 20% dividend, in another year 27%, and in yet another year he gave 19% to his shareholders. At the same time, this big dividend is after deducting the expenses including depreciation, taxation, reserve fund and reserve fund to capital invested. Apart from all these, they have made a net profit so as to distribute an average dividend at 13.5%. Can anybody imagine that such an industry should be allowed to distribute this high dividend at the cost of the poor labor who actually produce this profit? Certainly at the cost of the poor labor and the people they have got this profit. The coffee houses are getting coffee at the rate of rupees 210 per kilo. At the same time, how do they sell coffee there? Now there is another aspect of the rubber industry, namely the rubber producing industry, which has been entirely left out of the consideration of this bill. That is the rubber manufacturing industry. My honorable friend Mr. R.P. Sinha has rightly pointed out that aspect. We find that Indian rubber production has been consumed by the rubber manufacturing industry in India. So here is the question of increasing Indian production. As with the tea trade, the question is of export. As yet, the structure of the tea trade and the trends of the tea trade are such that it is mainly dependent on export, and whenever there is any loss of export market, there is a hue and cry of a crisis. But in the case of rubber industry, all the rubber produced in India is consumed by the rubber manufacturing industry in India. Rubber is a very important commodity and this industry should also be developed here. There is a deficit in Indian production, so the government thinks of allowing important import of rubber. If the production of rubber is increased by 27,000 tons a year, that will be consumed in India. That is all very true. So my point is that in connection with the development of rubber industry, we cannot leave the rubber manufacturing industry out of our consideration. These are closely connected with one another. Coming to the question of the rubber manufacturing industry, my friend Mr. R.P. Sinha has rightly pointed out that it is also dominated mainly by foreign companies. The rubber manufacturing industry in India produces various types of rubber goods, from tires to waterproofs and other rubber materials. They produce tires and tubes, cables, general mechanical goods including roofing, footwear and so on. But the predominant position in the rubber manufacturing industry is occupied by Messrs. Dunlop Rubber Company, Messrs. Firestone Tire and Rubber Company, Bata India, etc. And from the figures which have been given in the report of the Indian Tariff Board, it is seen that the average total consumption of rubber is distributed among a large number of small industries. Here also the question that arises is this: how should we treat these concerns, these big gigantic concerns? Sir, I have not studied the condition of labor in these industries of Messrs. Dunlop, Firestone and Goodyear Company. Therefore, just now I am not in a position to give you the picture of their condition. But the question is that from the price of rubber in India in the relation to the world price of rubber, these people are mostly benefiting. It is true that prices cannot be fixed in such a way that the big concerns will pay one price for the rubber and the small concerns will pay another price for rubber. Here also the main question that comes is this: if we want to develop the small units, the question arises of putting some check on the profits made. These big foreign concerns must go. It is they who are taking all the advantage of the present position in India. About that aspect, I find that there has been no mention in the bill and there was no indication in the speech of the Honorable Minister for Commerce. Then lastly, I would like to say that here also the government has taken the power to appoint the chairman and is going to reconstitute the board. The same remarks which I made in connection with the chairman of the coffee board are valid here. If it is the intention of the government to break the domination of the foreign rubber growers, stop.